So, you've decided to take the IELTS exam. Good for you. It's the test for study, work, and life.
So let's get started. During the reading module of the IELTS, there will be 3 passages that you read. And for each passage, there are a bunch of questions you have to answer. The first tip I have for you is don't spend too much time reading the passages. What happens to a lot of students is they read word for word everything. They see a word they don't know, they keep trying to understand the meaning. You don't have to understand everything to understand the passage. If you don't know a word, that's fine. The better thing to do than to slowly read is to use skills such as skimming, which means you quickly read for the main idea, or scanning, meaning you look for keywords or you look for specific detail. A lot of students, what they do for the IELTS is they actually will read the questions first, and then they will read the passage. And that way they know what they're looking for. You don't have to do this. It's one technique. Some students find this a lot easier. Other students like to read the passage first and then answer the questions. I recommend trying both out. First do the reading, then the questions, then try to read the questions first and read the passage, and see what you like better, what you're more comfortable doing. So the key thing here is don't read slowly. It's a time test. You have 3 parts you have to get through, 40 questions. It's very important that you read quickly. You can start practicing reading quickly also. There are a number of resources out there where you can actually start practicing and time yourself when you practice. Make sure you're not going over time. Number 2, similar to number 1, my tip is don't spend too long on each question. Some of the questions are difficult. They're possible. You can do well on them. But some of them you might be reading and you might think, oh, I don't know what the answer is. And you might look at it and think and try. Well, the problem is if you spend too much time on a question, there are 40 questions, and the 1 hour limit for the test, it goes by very quickly. So you can't spend too much time on each question. So what I recommend is read a question, try to figure out the answer. If you don't know it, you can put a star beside it and come back after. Don't spend too long on any question. You can also take a guess, move on, and come back later. My third tip, spend less time on earlier questions. For the reading module, like I said, there are 3 passages. The first passage is the easiest, then the second passage, and then the third passage. If you spend all your time on the first passage, you're not going to have time to do the second and the third. And like I said, the first one is easier. So a good idea is to spend less time on the first passage, maybe about 17 minutes. Then the second passage, maybe spend about 20 minutes. And the third passage, maybe 23 minutes. You don't have to follow this exactly, but the main idea is spend less time on part 1, more time on part 3, because part 3 is harder. My fourth point is make sure you have enough time to transfer your answers. They will have an answer sheet, and you're supposed to write your answers on it. It's very important to leave yourself time to transfer your answers from your test paper to the answer sheet. A lot of students, they work through the booklet, and then they realize there's no time to transfer their answers. So make sure you leave time for this. Okay, my 5th tip is a very, very common error students make. 3 words or less. In the reading section, also in the listening, in the instructions you will often see the words write 3 words or less. They mean write 3 words or less. A lot of students write too many words here. So for example, if I'm doing a reading on archaeology, and I have to write an answer, and my answer is the tomb of the pharaoh. For example, this is a pharaoh, if you don't know, ancient Egypt. If the instructions tell me write 3 words or less, and my answer is the tomb of the pharaoh, I've written way too many words. I've written 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's too many. So I would get this wrong on the IELTS, get a big X. Even though my answer was right, because I didn't follow the instructions and I wrote too many words, I'm going to get it wrong. So what would be the correct answer in this case is the pharaoh's tomb. This is 3 words. So in this example, that would be correct. We haven't gone over 3 words. Also, I could write for these questions maybe 1 word or maybe 2 words. I can write 1, 2, or 3 words, no more than that. Very common mistake. Number 6 is another common mistake students make. Their spelling. A lot of students forget that the reading section also has a writing component, and that is you have to write your answers. You also have to spell your answers correctly, and many students, unfortunately, make spelling mistakes. So it's very important to practice spelling before you do the IELTS. It will help you with the listening section, the writing section, and the reading section. I can't emphasize this enough. Spelling matters, okay? One idea is you can get a book, and any time you spell a word wrong, write it in your book and practice those words. Have a spelling book for yourself so you can see which words you often make mistakes with. Number 7, a lot of students also make this mistake with grammar. You have to use the correct grammar when you're answering a question. So for example, sometimes maybe the answer is castles with an S. But a student might write the singular version in their answer. Maybe they just write castle. But the correct form would be with an S. So you always have to be aware of grammar. The best thing to do is after you write your answer, check it to see if the grammar makes sense. Were they looking for singular answer? Were they looking for a plural answer? Okay, so that's very important to keep an eye out for. Finally, my last tip for today is a lot of students don't read the instructions properly. This is a very, very big mistake to make. A lot of students, they've done lots and lots of IELTS tests and they think they know it, so they don't bother reading the instructions. Always read the instructions. Even if you've done 100 IELTS tests, read the instructions just to make sure. For example, some common mistakes that happen is for multiple choice in the reading section. Maybe the question will ask you to choose 2 answers. And if you don't read the instructions properly, you might just pick 1. Or maybe it asks you to pick 3 answers. So it's very important to read the instructions properly. Another common issue with instructions is people confuse not given yes/no questions with not given true or false questions. They're different. So by reading the instruction, hopefully you can see the differences. And then when you're supposed to write yes, you don't write true. And when you're supposed to write no, you don't write false. So make sure you don't mix those questions up. Read the instructions.
How best to do IELTS reading? IELTS reading is one of 4 tests that are part of the IELTS, the International English Language Testing System. It's the one that you do second on your IELTS exam day. It takes 1 hour. You have no extra time to transfer your answers. So you will be given an answer sheet, as you have, and you will be given a text like this that in fact has 3 texts in it. and you have 1 hour. So you will have no extra time to transfer, unlike the listening. So that's so you will have 3 texts. So you've got 1 hour, 60 minutes, 20 minutes each. So the first thing that is really important for candidates is time management. That candidates who don't do well in reading spend far too long on the test, on the first text, and then they have no time to do the later texts, and so they get a very poor score.
Spending a little time planning at the beginning can save you time when writing and crucially addresses all the IELTS assessment criteria, so you will be more efficient and more effective.
So let's think there are 60 questions. You've got 60 minutes, and you've got 40 questions. So you've got to try and average 1.5 minutes for each one. So that's the target. And again, candidates who are inexperienced will find one question difficult. They'll read the text and then they'll read it again and again, and they've spent 15 minutes on one question. That's what you mustn't do. If you can't find the answer, you must move on and come back to it if you have time at the end. You will find that some questions are much easier than others. So let's just look at what's easy and quick and what takes longer. Easy, quick questions are usually words from the text. You can't guess them, but usually you'll find the right place in the text and you can get them very, very quickly once you've found the right place.
Make sure you underline key words in the exam question, identify how many parts there are to the question, and make sure you do everything you are asked to do.
Okay. Now there are other parts that will take much longer. So let's just look at the ones that will take a bit longer. Usually, the most difficult ones are finding information in paragraphs. That's more difficult, because you don't know your way round the text. You're in the jungle with it. So that's probably the one that takes you the longest. The first one will take you a long time. Once you get to know the text, you'll know where to look. So you have to average 1.5 minutes. The way it will work is probably the first 6 questions will take you at least 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and the last ones in any text will be much quicker because you'll know where to look. You'll know the text. You're not in the jungle. So I think that time management, if you get stuck, move on. That's the biggest thing to do, most important thing. Move on. Go back later if time. And then I think one more thing is never leave anything blank. Guess. Be prepared to guess. Never leave blanks. That means you must do the words early, because you can't guess words. You can guess true, false, not given. You can guess the A, B, C type answers. You can make sure that everything is filled, but you can't always, you can never guess the words from the text. But as those are the easiest ones, you need to look at the questions and make sure that you do those early, because they're usually easy to find and they're easy to get right. You don't have to worry about spelling them. The words are in the text. So, but, you know, definitely go for those. Okay, so I think that's the main ways to try and do well. Remember, you will not get extra time. You must fill this sheet as you do it. All right, you're reading your text. One more thing to say, and that is, do have a look at each text before you start. Don't go straight onto the first one. Just have a look and see what the topics are. Have a look and see what lies ahead. Usually, the first text is easier and the last text is harder. Each text, if we look at it, you've got 3 texts. The first one is 13 questions. First text is 13 questions. The second text is 13 questions. And the final text is harder and is 14 questions. And there is more to read. It's longer. So what you should do is make sure that you keep to 20 minutes for this easier one, 20 minutes for this one. Give this difficult one 20 minutes at least. You know, less good candidates only give 5 minutes to this last one, and they get them all wrong. And there's no way you can get a good score if you've got the last 14 questions mainly wrong. So, as I say, time is probably 50% of this. Be prepared to guess. If you get a lot of true, false, not given questions and you're running out of time, be prepared to guess them all. You know, go for yes, 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 yes. Won't take you very long to write it. Some of those will be right. But those kind of desperate measures will help your band score. Some of those will be right. Much better than thinking, I haven't got time to do this, blank, 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 blank. That's not going to help anyone. Okay, so hopefully you know how to use the time. You can start now, and I will set the timer. You have 1 hour. Fill the answers in as you go, because you won't be given extra time to do that. Uma, can you start reading the first paragraph for us?
Many women work outside the home, especially in developed countries, and this causes a lot of people to think women should have the same rights and responsibilities as men. Firstly, most women do have a more important role in raising children in most societies. I think men can be equally good at parenting for the following reasons.
Right, now, does everyone agree it should be firstly? No. Although, yes. Although is much better. All right, so this person has looked at both points of view in the introduction, which is perfectly all right to say there are 2 sides to this, and then he says, I think men can be equally good at parenting for the following reasons. So let's have, Sonam, could you read the next paragraph?
And dishwasher, housework does not take so much time for a parent who also has a job outside the home. However, according to survey about childcare at home in Japan, more than 10% of children aged between 5 and 10 are now parented by employed fathers, which is 3.5 times more than 20 years ago.
Right, now do we all agree that 4 is however? Or is it the same idea, or is it a different idea?
Different.
Is it a different idea? He's produced an example that is showing that fathers do much more now than they did 20 years ago. And he's talking about women are able to do more because of all the housework help they now get from the machines. So is however right? That's much better. Now, can you start a sentence with such as? What can you start a sentence with? For example, that's right. So, for example goes in number 4. What goes in number 3 then? Such as. Such as is fine in the middle of a sentence. For example can go in the middle or at the beginning. And never at the start of a paragraph. Never start a paragraph with for example. You should have a general idea first at the beginning of a paragraph. You know, the paragraphing is very, very important. Each of these paragraphs have got a different idea. The first one was machines do women's work, so it's fine for them to be outside the home working. The next paragraph.
For instance, an article I read recently by a child psychiatrist reported that children who have frequent contact with their fathers are much less likely to get bullied at school.
Okay, I agree with all your spaces. All right, 5 is secondly. All right, so this is the second main idea that's relevant to this question. Do you think people spend too much money on presents these days?
Yes, I think they spend too much money on presents these days. They go for brand, and sometimes some products which are not branded, they are as good as the branded products.
Yes.
Just that they have got that goodwill in the market. They sell better. I think locally made products are as good as the branded products.
Right,
So
great.
people pay for the extra franchise money, I think.
Locally made products are just as good. Prestige. You're really giving some very, very sensible answers, and that's just what we want. Okay, really good. If you say, yes, I think so, the examiner's going to come straight back at you and say, why is that? They're going to make you give your ideas with the vocabulary that you've got. So now I'm going to ask you a general question about presents. Do you think that children should not have to watch advertising because it makes them want things that they can't have?
So now it is the age of technology. So strictly banning children from not seeing the advertisement and all is quite difficult. But there could be some ways how we can minimize them watching advertising. Is that at home we can restrict them, or we can provide them time to enjoy the television and all.
Right.
Another is there should be some regulation in the public also, that everywhere they should not advertise things in the public places.
Right. Do you think television should be regulated so that children don't see adverts?
Yeah. In some way it may work. So like in the school and also instead of commercial advertisement and other things, so if they encourage like the live shows, like the discoveries and all, I think that will divert their attention. Then, so that way, instead of totally restricting, so they can encourage students to see more of the educational part.
Okay, that was great. Where you are always giving information, and the idea is that you learn and show that you can give information really clearly. Now time to give you, each of you, a little bit of feedback. In the real IELTS exam, you won't get any feedback. You'll probably have an examiner smiling, which is very nice, but that won't mean that you've done very well. It won't mean that you've done very badly. It's just that we smile to try and stop people being too nervous. But I'm going to give you feedback because that will help you to do it. It'll encourage you and it'll help you do it slightly better perhaps next time. So I want to say something about all of you. All of you, let's remember the things that we're interested in. I'm first of all going to talk about fluency. Fluency is 25% of your IELTS. And I think all of you, without exception, you were quite willing to answer the questions. I think you all managed to stay on the topic as well. Nobody went off the topic and talked about something else. I think everybody understood the questions well and responded well. And you didn't keep repeating information. Your answers were all interesting and relevant. So well done, all of you. When it came to vocabulary, I think that all of you could use more what we call less common words. I think you needed to try and give 3 pieces of information for each answer. I think the word endings are quite good, but some of the vowels cause confusion, and that's something to work on. And perhaps some people speak a little bit too fast, and so anybody listening will have to work hard to understand what they're saying.